All right, so the Mercedes-Benz build is winding down. I've got a list that is getting smaller every time I work on the car. It's really coming to a close, which is great. I want to get on to another build. I don't know what that's going to be yet, but I need something new to kind of inspire me a little bit. So what's this series about? Well, let me tell you. There's a couple things I need to do to this car to make it a daily driver. One is I need to keep the elements out. I've got this ongoing saga with my sunroof. The biggest thing, really the culprit to all of it, is I finally figured out that when I upgraded my cable or replaced it, I used a coupe, not a sedan sunroof cable. That's the whole reason for my issues with this car. The sunroof won't close because it's probably an inch or two too short because I have a coupe cable in there. Easy fix. I just need to wait for a car to show up in the junkyard because I'm not going to pay the prices that are on eBay and some other sources online. Okay, so what's the second issue? It's hot. I've lived in Virginia, I've lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I've lived here. Arizona, 120 degrees. But as you sweat, it's a dry heat and it will evaporate. It's still kind of miserable, but it's bearable. Here, I step outside and I sweat like a pig. I went to check out a real estate investment this morning. I was actually looking for a shop for Ben's Force as well as another investment property I could kind of roll into one. I was sweating so bad, the sweat from my balls was running down my leg into my shoe. It was unbearable. It's well over 100 degrees. The humidity is through the roof, and it is miserable. I need AC. When the winter rolls around, I will need a defroster, and I will need a heater. So this next series is dedicated to climate control because I've got to get it under control, and I've got to figure it out. So why don't we look at the car, and we'll talk about what's in this episode and what's coming up.
All right, so before we go too far, let me show you what we're going to do this episode. And at the end of the episode, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about next steps. So to begin with, I need to figure out how I'm going to mount the condenser and how I am going to run the plumbing. So at first, I had this condenser mounted in that hole. Now this condenser completely filled it to the point where it was almost impossible to run the plumbing. So I would have had to hack up the car to get this in place. It was in there. So when I spun a bearing in my rod and I took my engine out, I was lazy, to be honest. I didn't take the radiator out. I didn't take the condenser out. The engine slammed forward into my fan, which still bears some scars, into the radiator. I trashed the radiator, and the radiator actually pushed the condenser into the front fan, and you could see the damage here. But whether it's damaged or not, it was really too big to fit in that hole. So in this episode, I'm going to mount a new condenser right there. Simple eBay condenser. And I'm going to offset it to the driver's side, which of course is to the right for the US cars, looking at the front. And the reason I want to do that is because I've spent a lot of time figuring out how I'm going to run this plumbing. And I think I want the receiver dryer right over here. So I can utilize the factory holes coming through the radiator support and come up into the top of the condenser and also into the receiver dryer. So I want to try to fit everything I need in that spot, still utilizing the front factory fan. So as of now, I've just taken out the fan. I've taken the top mount out of my oil cooler so I have play and I can get back in there. And I'm going to try to use the same holes that I already drilled for this other condenser. By the way, this condenser, nothing wrong with it other than the damage that I've imposed upon it. It came from Restomod Air. I can't remember what it cost, but it was about a third of the cost of my eBay condenser. I'm done paying more than I need to. I have no doubt this is great and worth the money, but I also feel that a condenser is just a condenser. So Hey, why don't we get started? Let's get this mounted, and then we'll come back after the end of it, and we'll talk about next steps. Okay, so we've got our AC condenser all mounted in here. It's actually pretty strong. I just have a thicker gauge single mount on this side now. I have the two mounts that came with the old condenser coil on the other side. And I went ahead and I drilled out the mount for the dryer. And I'm going to mount it now right in here. It's going to make the turns with the plumbing pretty tight. But I think it's probably the best option for mounting this receiver dryer. Originally I wanted it up in the cabin with me, but under the dash things are getting pretty tight there, and for serviceability I thought it would just be best to have it out here. So I need to pull all of this out now. I want to sand down and clean up this bracket that I made, as well as the others, get them painted black. I'm going to leave this the natural color for now. I think the contrasting colors with this and the radiator and the oil cooler kind of make it look cleaner in a way, because you can see different layers and it's just not this big solid black mass. Of course that might change down the road. It depends on the view through the grill. I want the grill to be nice and black, but when it's open I kind of want everything to look very distinctive, yet kind of factory. So let me pull this apart. I'll go ahead and sand it down, and then we're going to talk about next steps. Okay, so let's talk next steps. So we have our brackets drying, right? They've been painted with a high temp engine enamel. They're drying right now. The condenser will go in there. As we discussed, it'll be offset a little to the driver's side to allow room for the receiver dryer. And the goal is to have the plumbing come out as low as possible right in here, if I can, below the oil lines. And the reason for that is we are where the AC compressor will be. Now the AC compressor, my welds, I ground down too much, didn't leave enough weld, and the bracket weld broke, so I re-welded that. That was in another video. No issues there. In fact, it's sitting up here on the workbench just waiting to be reinstalled. Let me grab that. So once we reinstall that and the compressor, we want to get the plumbing lines as low as possible down here, probably between or below that bottom oil line, so it's a straight shot, just a little piece of rubber hose to the compressor. The wiring for the compressor is already run. Okay, so we're going to utilize the same factory hole, which we can't pick up here with this camera. There it is, right through here. And it's got to make a sharp radius up to the receiver dryer and straight across to the compressor. Now the receiver dryer, of course, will go back down to the bottom of the condenser, and the top of the condenser will go to the other side of the compressor. So it's a little bit of a plumbing maze. The big dilemma is, what do I do with the plumbing from the condenser and compressor all the way into the cockpit? Now here's the problem. I have spent so much time hiding the wires and painting, filling firewall holes and everything on this engine, only to turn around and possibly be stuck with these big AC hoses. Now I've just laid them in here for comparison. All right, I mean, they just loop around in front of the engine, but if we go that route, it looks pretty ugly. And it really bothers me. Again, I've spent a substantial amount of time trying to clean this up as much as possible. So what I'm thinking about is, once that plumbing comes through this hole, have it come down along that frame rail, and then it will have to bend out around the shock tower a little bit and then just stop. It'll terminate right here, and I will have a rubber hose simply going from the shock tower area there up under the area into the cockpit. And inside the cockpit, of course, it'll be aluminum tube, because I've got a lot of sharp bends I need to cover there. So I will be contacting Restomod Air. They have been great about support so far. I think they have a top quality product. Of course, it's not hooked up yet. But I want to get their opinion on whether I will lose efficiency running aluminum tube versus the rubber hose. Because if I do all of this and in the end I'm still sweating in my car, I'm going to be a little disturbed. So I want to make sure that the aluminum tube will hold the charge long enough going by that exhaust that it will not be an issue. Anyhow, next episode, I hope to be running aluminum tube at least across the front of the car, through the radiator support on this side, and have the compressor side all hooked up. As always, thank you for watching. You can't imagine how many emails I get. I don't know everybody's scenario, and I'm not an expert in everything Mercedes. If you want to contact me, feel free. I will do my best to help you. I appreciate all the support and all the kind words that you send me. So thanks again, and have a great day.